The needle glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights of the euthanasia room. Amber Rodriguez's hands trembled as she prepared the lethal injection. 7 years of working at Riverdale Animal Shelter hadn't made this part any easier. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly, 8:58 a.m. In the steel cage before her, a one-eyed German shepherd watched her with an unsettling intensity. His scarred face and torn ear told stories of a harsh life, but it was the intelligence in that single amber eye that made Amber's stomach twist. "I'm sorry, Shadow," she whispered. The phone on the wall rang with sudden urgency. Amber hesitated, syringe in hand. 2 days ago, this dog had been labeled a vicious animal that attacked 15-month-old Emma Wilson. The district attorney himself demanded swift action. But something about Shadow's unwavering gaze told a different story. The phone continued ringing as the clock struck 8:59. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching. From now, let's continue with the story. Riverdale. Arizona shimmered under the relentless summer sun. Its affluent neighborhoods arranged in concentric circles around Lake Riverdale. The water served as both the town's crown jewel and its dividing line. Million-dollar homes with private docks on one side, modest developments on the other. Among these grand houses stood the Wilson residence, a sprawling southwestern-style home with terracotta roof tiles and a backyard pool that caught the afternoon light. District Attorney Jason Wilson had built his reputation on being tough on crime. At 42, his square jaw and prematurely silver hair gave him the authoritative appearance that helped win 3 consecutive elections. His wife, Sarah, had stepped back from her pediatrician practice when Emma was born 15 months ago. Their family portrait, Jason in his power suit, Sarah with her warm smile, and cherub-faced Emma graced the covers of local magazines when Jason announced his intention to run for state office. 3 streets away, in a cluttered office at the Riverdale Animal Shelter, Amber Rodriguez filed paperwork with military precision. At 35, the former canine handler still wore her dark hair in a tight bun, a habit from her Army days. The shelter job had been meant as temporary, something to do while figuring out civilian life after her divorce. 2 years later, she remained. Her apartment walls still bare except for a framed photo of her military service dog. Officer Mike Cunningham had been Riverdale's animal control officer for nearly 20 years. The 48-year-old took pride in his record, not a single reported animal attack during his tenure. His approach was uncompromising, public safety first, animal welfare second. Then there was Shadow, once a magnificent specimen of a German shepherd, now a ghost of his former self. His left ear torn to shreds, right eye missing, and a jagged scar running from his muzzle to his shoulder, all testaments to some terrible accident. For 2 years, he'd haunted Riverdale's streets, neither fully wild nor tame, avoided by most residents, except for Mrs. Eleanor Patterson. From her window, the 78-year-old widow tracked Shadow's movements each day. While others crossed the street at the sight of the scarred dog, Eleanor left bowls of water and scraps where he could find them. "He has gentle eyes," she told anyone who would listen. "That dog's no monster. He's just waiting for someone to remember that." The June morning unfolded like any other in Riverdale. Shadow emerged from his makeshift den beneath the abandoned gardening shed in Riverdale Community Park. His morning routine never varied a careful patrol of his territory, stopping at specific points to listen and observe. Despite his intimidating appearance, Shadow moved with the precision and purpose of a dog who had once known training. Residents walking their groomed pets would cross to the other side of the street when they spotted his distinctive silhouette. Children had been warned about the scary dog. Mothers would pull their kids closer when Shadow appeared, though he never approached humans directly. The neighborhood had labeled him dangerous simply for existing with his battle scars. "Morning, big fellow," Mrs. Patterson whispered from her porch as Shadow passed by her white picket fence. The elderly woman set down a bowl of fresh water and some leftover meatloaf, then retreated inside. From behind her curtains, she watched as Shadow waited until she was gone before approaching the offering. "That's it. Take your time," she murmured, noting how carefully he ate, how alert he remained even while drinking. Eleanor Patterson had been watching Shadow for months now. As a former veterinary assistant, she recognized the signs of a well-trained dog fallen on hard times. Not a mean bone in his body, she'd insist whenever the neighborhood watch discussed the stray problem. Nobody listened to an old woman's observations. By mid-morning, the temperature had already climbed to 93 degrees. Shadow found his usual spot beneath the oleander bushes that bordered the Wilson property. The dense foliage provided shade and a clear view of the Wilsons' backyard with its sparkling pool. On days like this, the Wilsons often spent time outside, and Shadow would watch from a distance, particularly focused on the small human who made high-pitched sounds that stirred something deep in his memory. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson noticed the Wilsons beginning their weekend routine. Sarah Wilson carried baby Emma out to the patio, setting up a playpen in the dappled shade of their pergola. Jason Wilson, dressed in casual clothes rather than his usual courtroom attire, arranged chairs and fired up the grill. The couple had invited a few colleagues over for a casual barbecue, a rare moment of relaxation in the district attorney's demanding schedule. "I've got the brief in the car," Jason called to a colleague who'd just arrived. "Let me grab it real quick." Sarah adjusted Emma's sun hat and set her down on the playmat with several colorful toys. "Watch her for a second. Would you?" she asked one of the female guests as her phone rang. "It's the hospital." "I need to take this." The guest nodded absently, already engaged in conversation with another arrival, her back partially turned to the baby. Emma, with the determination of a toddler just learning to walk confidently, pulled herself up and took several wobbly steps toward a butterfly that had landed on a nearby flowering bush. Nobody noticed when Emma toddled beyond the patio area, following the butterfly's erratic path. Nobody saw when she approached the unfenced portion of the yard that sloped gently down to the pool's edge. Nobody heard the small splash as Emma, reaching for the butterfly now fluttering above the water's surface, lost her balance and tumbled in. Nobody except Shadow. From his hidden vantage point, the German shepherd's single eye tracked the baby's movements with increasing alertness. When Emma disappeared beneath the water's surface, Shadow bolted from the bushes without hesitation. His powerful legs carried him across the lawn in seconds, his focus unwavering. The dog's splash into the pool finally caught the attention of the adults. Sarah Wilson turned from her phone call just in time to see something large and dark diving into her pool where Emma had been standing moments before. "Emma!" Sarah's scream cut through the casual conversation. "There's something in the pool with Emma." Jason dropped the legal papers and sprinted toward the water. The guests froze in horror as they processed what was happening. A large, scarred dog was in the pool with the baby, underwater. Shadow's powerful legs propelled him toward the small figure sinking toward the bottom. With gentle precision that belied his size, He gripped the back of Emma's sundress between his teeth and pushed upward, breaking the surface. Shadow paddled toward the shallow end, carefully keeping Emma's face above water. The toddler sputtered and began to cry as Shadow reached the pool steps. The dog delicately placed Emma on the first step where the water was only inches deep, making sure she was stable before backing away slightly, still watching her intently. Mrs. Patterson, who had moved to her porch when she saw Shadow sprint across the lawn, was now hurrying toward the Wilson property as fast as her arthritic knees would allow. "He's helping," she called out, but her elderly voice couldn't carry over the chaos erupting in the Wilson backyard. "Get away from her." Jason reached the pool first, seeing only a massive, scarred dog looming over his crying daughter. He grabbed a pool skimmer and swung it defensively between Shadow and Emma. Shadow backed away, shaking water from his fur but not fleeing. His single eye remained fixed on Emma, as if assessing whether she was truly safe. Sarah reached Emma next, scooping her dripping daughter into her arms, checking frantically for injuries. "Call 911. "Hey," she shouted, though Emma's cries indicated she was breathing and conscious. One of the guests, a man from Jason's office, grabbed a patio chair and advanced toward Shadow. "It's that stray, the one everyone's been complaining about." Shadow held his ground, making no aggressive moves but also not retreating further. Water dripped from his scarred muzzle and torn ear, his single eye moving between Emma and the advancing threats. "It attacked Emma," someone shouted. "It pulled her into the pool," another added. The narrative formed instantly among the panicked adults. The dangerous-looking dog had attacked a defenseless child. The fact that both Emma and Shadow were soaking wet only confirmed their worst fears in their minds. "Get that thing," Jason shouted, now advancing with the pool skimmer held like a weapon. "Don't let it escape." Shadow finally began to retreat as multiple adults converged on him, brandishing improvised weapons. He moved backward, still not turning to run, still watching Emma with an intensity that the humans misinterpreted as aggression. From across the street, Mrs. Patterson continued her approach, waving her arms. "Stop! The dog saved her. I saw everything." But her words were lost in the commotion. One of Jason's colleagues landed a blow with a garden rake, catching Shadow across his already scarred shoulder. The dog yelped but didn't snap or growl. "I've called animal control," another guest announced. "Phone in hand. They're on their way." Shadow finally turned and ran as the blows continued, disappearing around the side of the house. The mob pursued, determined not to let the dangerous animal escape into the neighborhood. Sarah, still clutching Emma tightly, hurried into the house to check her daughter more thoroughly, away from the chaos. She was surprised to find no bite marks or scratches on Emma's skin, just the expected signs of a brief submersion. Emma's crying had already subsided to hiccuping sobs, and she kept repeating something that sounded like "Dow, Dow," while pointing toward the pool. Outside, the improvised posse had cornered Shadow in the narrow passage between the Wilsons' garage and their fence. The dog stood with his back to the wall, panting heavily, making no move to attack despite being surrounded. A gash from the rake blow oozed blood down his already scarred shoulder. Officer Mike Cunningham arrived with his specialized van, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. "Stand back, folks," he commanded, readying his capture pole. "I'll handle this," "That beast attacked my daughter," Jason explained, his lawyer's voice authoritative even in crisis. "It dragged her into our pool." Cunningham nodded grimly. "We've had complaints about this one for months. Should have been picked up long ago." With clinical precision, he approached Shadow with the capture pole. Shadow watched the pole advance, seeming to recognize what was coming, rather than fight. The German shepherd sat down heavily, his single eye filled with what looked almost like resignation. The loop slipped over Shadow's head and tightened, as Cunningham led the dog toward the van. Mrs. Patterson finally pushed through the gathered neighbors. "You've got it all wrong," she insisted, breathless from her hurried approach. "That dog jumped in to save the baby. I saw the whole thing from my porch." "Ma'am, please step back," Cunningham replied dismissively. "This is a dangerous animal that just attacked a child." "But," Mrs. Patterson began. "Eleanor, go home." Jason cut her off firmly. "We all saw what happened. The dog is going where it belongs." As Shadow was loaded into the animal control van, his gaze found Mrs. Patterson. The old woman's eyes filled with tears at the quiet dignity in the dog's bearing. "Even now, I'll come find you," she whispered as the doors closed. "I'll tell them what really happened." But as the van pulled away, the neighborhood's verdict had already been rendered. The dangerous stray had finally shown its true nature. Justice would be swift. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Riverdale Animal Shelter intake room cast unflattering shadows across Shadow's wet fur as Officer Cunningham processed the new arrival. The German shepherd stood motionless on the examination table, neither resisting nor engaging as the animal control officer photographed him from multiple angles, documenting his scars, his missing eye, and the fresh wound on his shoulder. "Got yourself in real trouble this time," Cunningham muttered, filling out the intake form with practiced efficiency. Under "Reason for Impound," he wrote in block letters, "Attacked child, dangerous animal." Under Disposition, he checked the box labeled "Evaluation for Euthanasia." Shadow made no sound throughout the process. His single amber eye tracked the movements around him with an alertness that belied his otherwise defeated posture. When Cunningham slipped the specialized lead around his neck to move him to the kennels, Shadow followed without resistance, his nails clicking against the concrete floor in a steady rhythm. "Got a special case for you," Cunningham announced as Amber Rodriguez emerged from the staff room. "One-eyed German shepherd. Just attacked the DA's kid." Amber's eyebrows rose. "Jason Wilson's daughter. Is she okay?" "Apparently so. But no thanks to this one." Cunningham handed her the clipboard. "DA's already called. He wants this handled quickly, no adoption, no rescue placement. Says the dog's a menace." Amber took the clipboard, her eyes meeting Shadow's for the first time. Something in the dog's steady gaze made her pause. 7 years working with abandoned and abused animals had taught her to read canine body language, and what she saw didn't match Cunningham's description. No raised hackles, no averted gaze, no stress panting, just watchful intelligence and what almost looked like expectation. "I'll get him settled," she said, taking the lead from Cunningham. "Evaluation protocol says we hold him for at least 3 days before making any decisions." Cunningham snorted. "Wilson's already pushing for expedited processing. Said he'll get a court order if needed." "Well, until then, "We follow protocol," Amber replied firmly, her military background evident in her tone. "I'll clean that wound and get him documented properly." As Cunningham left, Amber led Shadow to the examination room. Unlike most new arrivals, the dog didn't pull against the lead or try to retreat. He moved with the fluid precision of an animal who had once been well trained. "Let's get a look at you," she murmured, carefully examining the gash on his shoulder. Shadow stood perfectly still as she cleaned and dressed the wound, not even flinching when she applied the antiseptic. "Good boy," she said reflexively, then paused. Something about this dog didn't fit the narrative she'd been given. Most dogs who had just attacked someone showed signs of agitation, aggression, fear, or both. Shadow displayed neither. After finishing her medical assessment, Amber led Shadow to the kennel area. The shelter was nearly at capacity, with dogs barking and lunging at their enclosure doors as they passed. Shadow remained calm beside her, neither reacting to the other dogs nor showing signs of stress. She settled him in the last kennel, a slightly larger space reserved for bigger breeds. "Rest now," she told him, filling his water bowl. "We'll figure this out." Shadow turned a complete circle, then settled on the thin blanket, his single eye fixed on the kennel door. He didn't bark or whine like the other new arrivals. He simply waited. Amber's puzzlement only deepened when she returned to the front desk and found Mrs. Eleanor Patterson arguing with the receptionist. "I need to speak with whoever's in charge," the elderly woman insisted, her voice shaking with emotion. "There's been a terrible mistake about that dog they just brought in." "Ma'am, you'll need to—" the receptionist began. "I'll handle this," Amber interjected. Recognizing the situation might escalate, she guided Mrs. Patterson to a small meeting room used for adoption interviews. "I'm Amber Rodriguez, the senior care technician. How can I help you? That German shepherd they brought in didn't attack anyone," Mrs. Patterson said without preamble, her arthritic hands clutching her purse straps. "I saw everything from my porch. The baby fell into the pool. And that dog Shadow, I call him, he jumped in and pulled her out." Amber's professional expression didn't change, though her interest sharpened. "You witnessed the incident. Every second of it," Mrs. Patterson confirmed. "I've been watching that dog for months. He patrols the neighborhood like he's on duty. Never bothers anyone. I feed him sometimes, when he'll let me." She leaned forward earnestly. "That little Wilson girl toddled right to the pool edge while the adults weren't looking. Fell in without a splash loud enough for anyone to hear. Shadow saw it happen and was in that pool faster than you could blink. Pulled her right to the steps, gentle as could be." Amber took notes as the woman spoke. "Did you tell Officer Cunningham this?" Mrs. Patterson's expression soured. "Tried to. Nobody would listen. They'd all decided what happened before they even saw it. That poor dog didn't growl or bite, even when they were hitting him with garden tools." After taking Mrs. Patterson's full statement and contact information, Amber found herself returning to Shadow's kennel. The German shepherd was exactly as she'd left him, sitting alert, watching the door. "What's your story, boy?" she murmured. Shadow's ear twitched at her voice, but his intense focus didn't waver. The shelter phone rang just as Amber was updating Shadow's file with Mrs. Patterson's contradictory account. Jason Wilson's name flashed on the caller ID. "Riverdale Animal Shelter. This is Amber," she answered professionally. "This is District Attorney Wilson," came the clipped response. "I'm calling about the dangerous dog that attacked my daughter today." "Yes, Mr. Wilson. I have the intake report here. I understand your concern, but our protocol requires a 3-day holding period before—" "That animal is a public menace," Wilson interrupted. "I've already spoken with Judge Harmon. You'll have court orders tomorrow morning for immediate euthanasia. I won't have that beast threatening other children." Amber kept her voice neutral. "Sir, we have a witness who claims the dog was actually trying to help your daughter. A Mrs. Patterson says. Eleanor Patterson is an elderly woman with a soft spot for strays," Wilson cut in dismissively. "She wasn't even in our yard. My entire backyard was full of witnesses who saw what really happened. Our veterinarian will need to examine your daughter to document any bite wounds, or there are no bite wounds because my wife pulled Emma away before that animal could do real damage," Wilson stated firmly. "The fact that it dragged a baby into a pool is sufficient grounds for euthanasia." After ending the call, Amber sat motionless at her desk. Something wasn't adding up. A dangerous dog that left no bite marks. A rescue account from one witness versus an attack account from others. A dog with professional training behaviors now living as a stray. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Thomas Green, the shelter's veterinarian. At 65, Green had seen everything in his 4 decades of practice and had developed a philosophical approach to the shelter's hardest cases. "Heard we got the DA's attacker," he said, reviewing Shadow's intake forms. "Cunningham says it's a straightforward, dangerous dog case." "I'm not so sure," Amber replied, explaining Mrs. Patterson's account and her own observations of Shadow's behavior. Dr. Green frowned thoughtfully. "No bite wounds on the child. None reported. And the dog shows no aggression indicators. None that I can detect. Just the opposite, he shows signs of professional training." Green sighed heavily. "Well, let's have a look at him. Wilson's got pull with the city council that funds us. If he wants this dog put down, we'll need compelling evidence to push back." Together they returned to Shadow's kennel. The German shepherd stood when they approached, his posture alert but not tense. "Hello there, fellow," Green said softly, entering the kennel with the practiced caution of a veterinarian who had been bitten more times than he could count. Shadow made no aggressive moves, allowing Green to check his vitals and examine him thoroughly. "This dog has had serious medical care in the past," Green observed, feeling along Shadow's scarred muzzle. "The eye removal was done surgically, not from a fight or accident. Same with some of these older healed wounds. Professional work." As Green continued his examination, a baby's cry echoed from the front of the shelter. A young mother had entered with an infant in a carrier, coming to look at cats for adoption. Shadow's reaction was immediate and startling. His entire body tensed, his ear pricked forward, and he moved to the kennel door, staring intently in the direction of the cry. "That's interesting," Green murmured, watching as Shadow whined softly, his attention completely captured by the distant sound. "He's not aggressive toward the sound," Amber noted. "He seems concerned." When the baby's cry stopped, Shadow remained alert for several moments before reluctantly returning to his blanket, though his attention stayed fixed on the direction of the sound. "I want to run some tests." Green said finally. Standard temperament evaluations, but also some specific scenarios. If this dog was a service or working animal, he might have specific training triggers. Before they could discuss further, Amber's phone buzzed with a text from the front desk. Sarah Wilson here about the German Shepherd. The mother, Amber explained to Green. I'd better go see what she wants. In the reception area, Sarah Wilson stood with Emma balanced on her hip. The toddler's face was flushed from crying, but she seemed otherwise unharmed. Sarah's expression was difficult to read, a mixture of anger and something else. Uncertainty, perhaps. Mrs. Wilson? Amber greeted her professionally. How can I help you? I want to see it, Sarah said without preamble. The dog that was in our pool with Emma. Amber hesitated. We generally don't allow public access to dangerous animal holds, for safety reasons. I need to see for myself, Sarah insisted, her voice lowering. Please, I need to know what we're dealing with. Something in the woman's tone made Amber reconsider. Let me check with Dr. Green. Would you mind waiting a moment? When she returned to the kennel area, Amber was surprised to find Green kneeling beside Shadow, examining the tag on the worn leather collar partially hidden beneath his thick fur. There's something here, Green said, not looking up. The tag is damaged, but there's part of a name, Ra something, and a partial phone number. Could be a service dog registry. Mrs. Wilson is here, Amber interrupted. She wants to see Shadow. Green straightened with a groan as his knees protested. Unusual. The victims don't typically want to face the animal again. She seems conflicted, like she's trying to make sense of what happened. Green considered this. Might be helpful to observe their interaction. Bring her back, but keep the child at a safe distance. Amber returned to the reception area and led Sarah, still carrying Emma, to the kennel section. We'll stay at the observation distance, she explained, positioning them where they could see Shadow's kennel clearly but from several feet away. Shadow, who had been lying down again, immediately rose to his feet when he saw them. His reaction to Emma was unmistakable, intense focus. Forward ears, and a soft whine deep in his throat. He made no aggressive moves, no barking or growling, just rapt attention fixed on the child. Dow! Emma exclaimed suddenly, pointing at Shadow and squirming in her mother's arms. Dow! Dow! Sarah's face paled. She's been saying that since it happened. I thought she was saying down. She's saying dog, Amber suggested gently. As they watched, Shadow sat down precisely at the front of his kennel, his bearing almost formal, like a dog awaiting instructions. He doesn't look mean, Sarah said hesitantly. When Jason pulled Emma from the pool, she wasn't injured, just wet and scared. There were no bite marks, not even a scratch. Mrs. Patterson, your neighbor, claims Shadow jumped in to rescue Emma, not to harm her, Amber said carefully, watching Sarah's reaction. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. That can't be right. Everyone said. Before she could continue, Emma began squirming more vigorously and repeating, Dow, Dow, with increasing insistence, reaching her small hands toward Shadow's kennel. Shadow remained perfectly still, watching the child with that same intense focus, but making no move to approach the kennel door or display any aggression. "Your husband has requested immediate euthanasia," Amber said quietly. "But if there's any doubt about what actually happened—" Sarah clutched Emma tighter, her expression troubled. "I need to think about this. I need to talk to Jason." As she turned to leave, Shadow finally moved, taking a single step forward and making a soft sound, not quite a whine, not quite a bark. Emma twisted in her mother's arms, still reaching back toward the dog. "Thank you for showing me," Sarah said stiffly, her composure visibly shaken. I'll be in touch." After they left, Amber found Green reviewing Shadow's intake photos at the computer. "Something's not adding up," he said without looking up. "This dog shows every sign of professional training. The way he sits, his focus, his restraint. And look at these old scars consistent with injury from a fall or impact, not fighting or abuse." He turned to Amber with grave concern. "We need more information before any irreversible decisions are made. Unfortunately, with Jason Wilson pushing for immediate action, time is not on our side." The morning after Shadow's capture, Amber arrived at the shelter an hour before her shift officially began. She'd spent a restless night, her mind replaying the inconsistencies in the case against the German Shepherd. 20 years of working with dogs, first in the military and then at the shelter, had honed her instincts, and everything about this situation felt wrong. Shadow was awake when she approached his kennel, sitting in the same alert posture as yesterday. Unlike the other dogs who barked and jumped excitedly at the first sign of human attention, Shadow observed her with quiet intensity, his single amber eye tracking her movements. "Morning, big guy," Amber said softly, kneeling by the kennel door. "How about some breakfast?" Shadow remained seated until she opened the door, then stood with military precision, waiting for permission to approach. Amber noted the behavior with growing curiosity. This was not a feral stray, this was a highly trained animal. As Shadow ate his kibble with methodical restraint, Amber used the opportunity to examine his collar more closely. The worn leather had clearly once been high quality, the kind used for working dogs rather than pets. The damaged tag Dr. Green had discovered hung loosely, its surface scratched almost beyond recognition. Only the first two letters, R.A., and the last 3 digits of a phone number remained visible. "Who were you, boy?" Amber murmured, gently running her hand along Shadow's scarred back. "And how did you end up on the streets?" After Shadow finished eating, Amber decided to test her theory about his training. She made a specific hand gesture, palm flat, moving downward that professional handlers used to signal down. Shadow immediately responded, lowering his body to the ground in one fluid movement. Amber tried another signal for stay, and Shadow remained perfectly still, watching her expectantly. "Just as I thought," she whispered. "You're not just any stray." The shelter's front door chimed, indicating an early visitor. Securing Shadow's kennel, Amber made her way to the reception area where she found Mrs. Patterson waiting, clutching a manila folder. "I couldn't sleep a wink," the elderly woman announced without preamble. "Not with that poor dog facing a death sentence for something he didn't do." "Mrs. Patterson, I appreciate your concern, but we're not open for another hour. I've been documenting him," Mrs. Patterson interrupted, opening the folder to reveal dozens of dated photographs. "Ever since he first appeared in our neighborhood 2 years ago." Amber's professionalism gave way to genuine interest as she examined the photographs. They showed Shadow at various locations around Riverdale, always at a distance, always observing rather than engaging. He established a regular route, Mrs. Patterson explained, her arthritic finger tracing paths on the photos. Same times every day, like he was on patrol. Never approached people unless they were in distress. In distress? Amber asked. Mrs. Patterson nodded emphatically. Last winter, Harold Simmons slipped on ice while getting his mail. Shadow appeared from nowhere, stood beside him until Harold could grip his collar and get back on his feet, then disappeared again. Same thing when Maisie Tucker had her asthma attack in the park, stayed with her until help came. The elderly woman pulled out more recent photos. And he's been watching the Wilson house specifically for months, ever since the baby started playing outside. Always hidden, always vigilant, like he appointed himself her guardian. Amber carefully examined the evidence. The pattern was undeniable. Shadow had been behaving like a trained service dog on an unauthorized mission. Mrs. Patterson, this is extremely helpful. Would you be willing to make a formal statement about what you witnessed yesterday? Already prepared it, Mrs. Patterson replied, producing a neatly typed document. Had my nephew help me print it out. He's a lawyer, too, though not as high and mighty as Jason Wilson. As Amber filed Mrs. Patterson's statement and photographs, her cell phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check news archives. Search Ranger plus Cave Rescue plus Arizona from 3 years ago. Amber stared at the message, baffled by its mysterious nature, but intrigued by its timing. When Dr. Green arrived 30 minutes later, she showed him both Mrs. Patterson's documentation and the anonymous text. Ranger, Green mused, connecting the dots. The partial name on his tag, R.A., could be Ranger. Amber was already searching the terms on her computer. The results made her breath catch. Headlines from 3 years ago filled the screen. Tragedy in Canyon Rescue, child lost, hero dog severely injured. Search dog Ranger, critical after saving father in cave collapse. Ranger's handler gives up hope he'll never work again. Attached to the articles were photos that stopped Amber cold. A magnificent German shepherd in search and rescue gear, his coat glossy and unmarked, standing proudly beside his handler. The same distinctive white chest marking that Shadow bore was clearly visible. "It's him," she whispered, showing Green the screen. "Shadow is Ranger." Green adjusted his reading glasses, studying the articles closely. Canyon collapsed during a flash flood. Father and daughter trapped. Ranger located them but was critically injured when a secondary collapse occurred while leading rescuers to them. The father survived, but the child... He trailed off, the tragedy evident in the headlines. The 5-year-old girl had not survived the ordeal. The handler gave him up, Amber said, her voice hardening as she continued reading. Robert Mitchell said Ranger was too traumatized after losing the girl and sustaining his injuries, that he couldn't handle the dog's disfigurement. So a hero dog loses an eye and gets a few scars, fails to save one child despite risking his life, and suddenly he's disposable. Green's normally gentle voice took on an edge of disgust. Amber scrolled through more articles, piecing together Ranger's story. The once celebrated search and rescue dog had been surrendered to a shelter in Phoenix after his recovery from surgery. Records indicated he had been adopted, but clearly he had either escaped or been abandoned again, eventually making his way to Riverdale. He's been living on the streets for 2 years, still trying to do his job, Amber said softly. Still trying to save people. Before they could discuss further, the shelter's front desk called back. Jason Wilson had arrived with official paperwork. The district attorney's tailored suit and commanding presence filled the small shelter office. He placed a document on the counter with the practiced precision of a man accustomed to legal maneuvers. "Court order for immediate euthanasia," he stated flatly. "Judge Harmon signed it this morning. The animal is to be put down by end of business today." Amber maintained her professional composure despite the anger building inside her. "Mr. Wilson, we've discovered significant information about this dog that may change your perspective on what happened." Wilson's expression remained impassive. "The animal interfered with my child and created a dangerous situation. That's all that matters. Sir, we have reason to believe Shadow, or rather, Ranger, is a former search and rescue dog. We have documentation of his past service, and I don't care if he won medals." Wilson interrupted sharply. "That dog is dangerous and unpredictable. The court agrees. You have your orders." Dr. Green stepped forward. "Mr. Wilson, as the veterinarian responsible for this facility, I'm required to conduct a full behavioral assessment before any euthanasia decision, court order or not. It's state law." Wilson's jaw tightened. "Fine. You have until 5 p.m. Not a minute longer." After Wilson left, Amber and Green exchanged troubled glances. "He's unusually determined to see this dog put down," Green observed. "Almost personally invested." Amber agreed. "Let's run the full assessment protocol, and I want to look deeper into these rescue articles." Throughout the morning, they put Shadow through a series of standard tests designed to evaluate his temperament. The German Shepherd passed each one with remarkable composure. No food aggression, no territorial behavior, no reaction to provocative movements. When they brought in a life-size doll representing a child, Shadow's demeanor changed to alert protectiveness without any aggression. "He's not just passing," Green noted as they documented the results. "He's demonstrating textbook service dog responses." Meanwhile, Amber continued researching the Canyon rescue incident, scanning through news photographs from the event. In one expanded image showing the rescued father being loaded into an ambulance, she noticed something that made her pulse quicken, a partial profile that looked remarkably familiar. "Dr. Green," she called, her voice tight with discovery. "I think Jason Wilson was the father Ranger rescued 3 years ago." Green examined the photograph, his eyebrows rising in surprise. That would explain his unusually personal interest in this case. But why would he want to euthanize the dog that saved his life? Amber wondered. Guilt, perhaps. Green suggested. His daughter died despite Ranger's efforts. Sometimes survivors develop complex feelings toward those associated with their trauma. A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Sarah Wilson stood in the doorway, her expression hesitant. This time, she was alone. "Mrs. Wilson," Amber greeted her, quickly minimizing the research on her computer screen. "How can we help you?" "I've been thinking about yesterday," Sarah began, her voice controlled but strained. "About the dog. Jason is... He's certain about what happened, but I keep remembering that there were no injuries on Emma. Not a scratch." She paused, visibly gathering her thoughts. And Emma keeps asking for the Tao. She's been inconsolable since yesterday, looking out the window toward where she usually sees him in the bushes. Would you like to see Shadow again? Amber offered gently. Sarah nodded. And, I'd like to know more about him. Jason says he's just a dangerous stray, but the way he looked at Emma yesterday wasn't threatening. It was something else. Amber led Sarah to Shadow's kennel, where the German shepherd sat alert as always. Upon seeing Sarah, he rose to his feet, but made no sound. We've discovered that Shadow was once a search and rescue dog named Ranger, Amber explained, observing Sarah's reaction closely. He was involved in a canyon rescue operation about 3 years ago. Sarah's expression remained neutral, showing no recognition at the information. If Jason had been involved in that incident, he apparently hadn't shared that detail with his wife. He's been living on the streets for approximately 2 years, Amber continued. According to your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, he's established a regular patrol route through your neighborhood and has actually helped several residents during emergencies. Sarah watched Shadow with growing uncertainty. But why would he be so focused on our house on Emma? Amber chose her words carefully. Service dogs, especially those trained for rescue, often maintain their training even after retirement. It's possible he recognized something in your family situation that triggered his protective instincts. Sarah approached the kennel cautiously. Shadow remained perfectly still, his single eye fixed on her with that same intense focus. "May I?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward the kennel door. "Let me go in with you," Amber suggested, unlocking the door and entering first. Shadow remained in a sitting position, making no move to approach until Amber gave him the signal to stay. Sarah entered hesitantly, kneeling a few feet from Shadow. The German shepherd's attention never wavered, but his body language remained calm and non-threatening. "He doesn't seem dangerous," Sarah observed quietly. "Mrs. Wilson," Amber began delicately, "your husband has obtained a court order for Shadow to be euthanized today at 5 p.m. Sarah's head snapped up in surprise. "Today? But that's so fast. Don't you need to do evaluations or something?" "We've completed them. Shadow shows no signs of aggression whatsoever. In fact, he displays all the hallmarks of his search and rescue training, but without evidence contradicting the attack narrative. We're legally obligated to comply with the court order." Sarah extended her hand slowly toward Shadow. The dog remained still, allowing her to touch his scarred head gently. "This feels wrong," she whispered. "If Mrs. Patterson saw him save Emma." "Do you have security cameras at your home, Mrs. Wilson?" Amber asked suddenly, an idea forming. "Yes, Jason had them installed when Emma was born. They cover the backyard, including the pool area. Those recordings would show exactly what happened yesterday," Amber suggested. "Would it be possible for you to check them?" Sarah bit her lip, nodding slowly. "Jason has the system on his phone. I can access it too, but I'd need to do it without him knowing. He's so certain about what happened. Mrs. Wilson, I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position, but Shadow's life depends on discovering the truth. If there's any chance the footage shows him rescuing Emma rather than endangering her..." Sarah stood abruptly, decision evident in her posture. "I'll check the recordings and call you. What's your direct number?" After Sarah left, Amber rejoined Dr. Green in the office. updating him on the potentially crucial development. "If we can get that footage, we might have a chance," Green acknowledged. "But Wilson struck me as a man who covers his bases. I wouldn't be surprised if he's already reviewed and possibly deleted anything that contradicts his version of events." Why would he be so determined to eliminate a dog that poses no threat? Amber wondered aloud. If our theory is correct, and Shadow is the same dog that was involved in the canyon incident where Wilson's first child died, his motivations could be complex, Green suggested. Psychological trauma works in mysterious ways. Perhaps seeing Shadow triggers unbearable memories. As the day progressed, Amber continued digging into the canyon rescue story while waiting for Sarah to call. Additional articles revealed more details. Robert Mitchell had been Ranger's handler for 5 years. The dog had received commendations for previous successful rescues. The canyon tragedy had occurred when Mitchell ignored weather warnings about potential flash flooding. Most significantly, she discovered a detail that confirmed their suspicions. The father rescued from the canyon was identified in one small local paper as J. Wilson, 39, a lawyer from Phoenix. The piece mentioned that while Wilson survived, his daughter Lily did not. He lost his first daughter in that canyon. Amber told Green quietly. And Shadow Ranger reminds him of that loss every time he sees him. That explains his extreme reaction, Green nodded solemnly. But it doesn't justify condemning an innocent animal. By mid-afternoon, with no word from Sarah, tension in the shelter mounted. Staff members who had interacted with Shadow during his brief stay had been won over by his gentle demeanor and dignified bearing. Word had spread about his heroic past and likely heroic actions at the Wilson pool. A small group of shelter volunteers had even gathered in the lobby, some with hastily made Save Shadow signs. At 3:30 p.m., Officer Cunningham arrived to oversee the euthanasia procedure scheduled for 5 p.m. His expression was grim but determined as he reviewed the court order. "Just doing my job," he told Amber when she approached him. "Nothing personal against the dog, but we have our protocols." "The dog is innocent. Mike," Amber replied, abandoning professional distance. "We have reason to believe he saved that child, not endangered her. We're just waiting for evidence." Cunningham's expression softened slightly. "Look, I get it. I've seen you turn around some tough cases, but this comes from the DA and a judge. My hands are tied unless something concrete changes the official narrative." At 4:15 p.m., with time running critically short, Amber's phone finally rang. Sarah Wilson's voice came through in a rushed whisper. "I checked the footage," she said without preamble. "You were right. The cameras caught everything. Emma wandered to the pool while everyone was distracted. She fell in. Shadow jumped in after her and pulled her to the steps. He saved her life." Relief flooded through Amber. "Mrs. Wilson, that's exactly what we needed. Can you send us the footage immediately?" A long pause followed. "It's gone," Sarah replied, her voice breaking. "When I went back to download it, all footage from yesterday had been deleted from the system. Jason must have erased it." Amber's heart sank. Without that evidence— "I saw it," Sarah interrupted firmly. "I know what happened now. I'm coming to the shelter. Don't let them hurt that dog." The call ended abruptly, leaving Amber clutching a useless phone and watching the clock tick inexorably toward 5 p.m. "Any news?" Dr. Green asked. entering the office with Shadow's prepared euthanasia paperwork in hand. Sarah Wilson confirmed Shadow rescued Emma, but the security footage has been deleted. Amber explained quickly. She's on her way here, but without actual evidence. Green shook his head grimly. Cunningham's already preparing the euthanasia room. Wilson himself is expected at 4:45 to witness the procedure. Without court-admissible proof, testimonials won't override a judicial order. Amber felt the weight of defeat pressing down on her. She'd failed many animals over the years. The shelter system was often unforgiving, but never one so undeserving of its fate. Never a hero being punished for his instinct to save. "I want to stay with him," she said quietly. "Until the end." In Shadow's kennel, the German shepherd seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. When Amber entered, he approached her without prompting, pressing his scarred head gently against her leg in an unexpected gesture of comfort. "You know, don't you?" she whispered, kneeling to embrace him. "You've always known when people needed saving." As the minute hand crept toward 4:30, Amber remained with Shadow, telling him about the articles she'd found, about his celebrated career as ranger, about the lives he'd touched. The German shepherd listened with that same dignified attention, his single amber eye never leaving her face. "You deserved so much better than this," Amber told him, fighting back tears that threatened to undermine her professional composure. "You did everything right." At precisely 4:45, Dr. Green appeared at the kennel door, his expression grave. "It's time, Amber. Jason Wilson has arrived with Judge Harmon to witness the procedure." With leaden movements, Amber attached Shadow's lead. The German shepherd followed her without resistance, his head held high, his step sure, not a dog being led to his death, but a soldier accepting his final mission. As they approached the corridor leading to the euthanasia room, Amber heard raised voices from the lobby. She paused. Shadow alert beside her, both sensing a disruption to the grim proceedings. "What's happening?" she asked Green, who had stepped ahead to investigate. The veterinarian turned back, a flicker of hope lighting his tired eyes. "Sarah Wilson is here, and she's not alone." The shelter's lobby had transformed into an impromptu battleground. Sarah Wilson stood at its center, Emma clutched protectively in her arms, facing her husband across the narrow divide of institutional tile flooring. Behind her clustered Mrs. Patterson, 3 shelter volunteers, and a tall man Amber didn't recognize who carried professional camera equipment. "This has gone far enough, Jason." Sarah's voice carried down the corridor, steady and determined. "I saw the security footage before you deleted it. That dog saved our daughter." Jason Wilson's normally composed courtroom demeanor had fractured around the edges. His face flushed with anger. Tie loosened. He glanced nervously between his wife and Judge Harmon, who stood witnessing the confrontation with evident discomfort. "Sarah, this isn't the place," Jason replied, his voice lowered in an attempt to regain control of the situation. "We can discuss this at home." "There's nothing to discuss," Sarah countered. "You're about to kill an innocent animal, a hero to cover up our negligence. Emma fell into that pool because we weren't watching her. Shadow jumped in and saved her." Amber felt a slight pressure against her leg. Shadow had moved forward slightly, his attention fixed on Emma, the toddler, spotting the German shepherd, began squirming in her mother's arms. reaching out and repeating her now familiar refrain, "Dow, Dow, Doctor." Green stepped forward into the lobby, his authoritative presence drawing all eyes. "In light of new testimony, I'm suspending the euthanasia procedure pending review." Judge Harmon, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Dr. Green, I sympathize with your position, but the court order is quite clear. Without material evidence contradicting the original incident report." "I have evidence," the unknown man with the camera interjected, stepping forward. "Brad Thompson, Channel 12 News. I was filming B-roll for a community piece yesterday when I captured the entire incident from across the street." The revelation sent a visible shock through the room. Jason Wilson's composure crumbled further, his eyes darting toward the exit. "That's impossible," he stammered. "There were no news crews in our neighborhood yesterday." Thompson's professional smile never wavered. "Drone footage. Mr. Wilson. We were documenting Riverdale's summer landscape for a segment on drought-resistant landscaping. Your backyard pool happened to be in frame when the incident occurred." He held up a small flash drive. "High-definition video showing exactly what happened. I was going to bring it to the authorities this morning, but our legal department had to review it first. When I heard about the euthanasia order, I came directly here." Amber felt a surge of hope so powerful it nearly buckled her knees. Shadow remained perfectly still beside her, as if understanding the gravity of the moment unfolding before them. "I'd like to see this footage immediately," Judge Harmon stated, professional curiosity overriding his previous certainty. "As would I," Jason interjected, attempting to reassert control. "And I'll need my office to verify its authenticity before any decisions are made about the animal." Sarah stepped closer to her husband, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper that nonetheless carried in the hushed room. "Stop it, Jason. This isn't about the dog, and you know it. This is about Lily." The name fell like a stone into still water. Jason physically recoiled, color draining from his face. "Don't," he warned, voice breaking. "Don't bring her into this." "She's already in it," Sarah continued gently but firmly. "She has been since the moment you saw Shadow pull Emma from the pool. I didn't understand then, but I do now. But I do." She shifted Emma to her hip, keeping her free hand on Jason's arm. "Shadow reminds you of Ranger, doesn't he? The dog from the canyon?" Jason's eyes darted frantically between Sarah and Shadow, the composed district attorney replaced by a man clinging to the fraying edges of a painful secret. "You never told me the full story," Sarah pressed. "Just that Lily died in a hiking accident before we met. You never mentioned a rescue dog was there." "He failed," Jason whispered hoarsely, his gaze now locked on Shadow. "He was supposed to save her." Amber stepped forward slowly, leading Shadow into the lobby. "Mr. Wilson, Ranger didn't fail. According to the reports, he found both you and your daughter despite severe flooding. He led rescuers to you at great risk to himself. The second cave collapse that killed Lily also nearly killed him." Jason's composure cracked entirely. "He chose me," he said, the words torn from somewhere deep and wounded. "He pulled me out first. If he'd taken Lily instead, she might have survived." The revelation hung in the air, the true source of Jason's vendetta finally exposed. Dr. Green spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Wilson, Search dogs are trained to rescue whoever they can reach first. Ranger didn't make a choice. He followed his training and saved a life, yours. And yesterday, Shadow did exactly the same thing for your daughter. Shadow, sensing the focus on him, maintained perfect discipline despite the emotional maelstrom surrounding him. His single eye remained fixed on Emma, who continued reaching for him with increasing determination. "Down, please," Sarah said quietly, setting Emma carefully on the floor while keeping a protective hand on her shoulder. The toddler immediately toddled forward, her unsteady gait directed unerringly toward Shadow. Jason made an aborted movement to stop her, then froze, watching with naked fear as his daughter approached the dog he'd condemned. Amber knelt beside Shadow, keeping a gentle hand on his collar. "Stay," she whispered, though the command proved unnecessary. The German shepherd held perfectly still as Emma reached him, her small hands patting his scarred muzzle with delighted giggles. "Tao," she repeated triumphantly, looking back at her parents with a beaming smile. The simple tableau-scarred dog and innocent child accomplished what no argument could have. Something shifted in Jason Wilson's expression, a rigid barrier crumbling beneath the weight of the moment. "We have a conference room where we can view the footage privately," Dr. Green suggested, gesturing toward the shelter's administrative area. "Perhaps we should proceed there." Thompson, Judge Harmon, and the Wilsons followed Green to the conference room, leaving Amber with Shadow and Emma under Mrs. Patterson's watchful eye. The elderly woman beamed at the scene before her. "I told them," she said with quiet satisfaction. "Nobody listens to old ladies anymore, but sometimes we see things clearer than most." Emma had settled herself comfortably against Shadow's side, her small hand clutching a handful of his fur. The German shepherd had carefully positioned himself to allow her to lean against him while maintaining a protective posture. His body curved slightly around her. "He's still doing his job," Amber observed softly. "After everything, he's still protecting." 20 minutes later, the conference room door opened. Judge Harmon emerged first, his judicial demeanor softened by evident emotion. He approached Amber directly. "I am rescinding the euthanasia order effective immediately," he stated formally. "The evidence clearly shows the dog acted heroically, not aggressively. My apologies for the error in judgment." Behind him came Sarah, her face streaked with tears but smiling. Jason followed, his expression complex grief, shame, and something like dawning recognition intermingled. "The footage confirms everything," Sarah explained, kneeling to gather Emma into her arms. Shadow saw Emma fall in and didn't hesitate for a second. He pulled her directly to the steps and made sure she was safe. Jason approached slowly, keeping a cautious distance from Shadow. The German shepherd watched him with that same steady gaze, neither fearful nor aggressive. "I was wrong," Jason admitted, the words clearly difficult for a man accustomed to prosecutorial certainty. "When I saw him standing over Emma, all I could think about was—" He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "Lily," Sarah finished gently. "And Ranger," Jason nodded, his professional facade cracking further. "They look so similar. Same markings. When I saw him with Emma, soaking wet, it all came back the canyon, the flood, Ranger pulling me out while Lily—" He stopped, composing himself with visible effort. I couldn't save her, and I blamed him. I blamed the dog for making the wrong choice. It wasn't Ranger's fault, Amber said quietly. And it wasn't yours either, Mr. Wilson. Jason met the German shepherd's gaze directly for the first time. Shadow tilted his head slightly, that single amber eye reflecting a wisdom beyond human understanding. When I saw him with Emma yesterday, I thought history was repeating itself, Jason continued. I couldn't bear the thought of losing another daughter. It was easier to blame the dog than to face what really happened. And what was that? Amber asked gently. That I wasn't watching her carefully enough, Jason admitted, his voice breaking. Just like I wasn't careful enough with Lily when I took her hiking despite the weather warnings. It's my fault. It's always been my fault. Sarah moved to her husband's side, still holding Emma. We all looked away. Jason. Every adult at that party. Shadow was the only one watching out for her. In the wake of the revelation and Jason's painful confession, the shelter lobby gradually emptied. Thompson left with his footage after securing permission to air the story of Shadow's heroism rather than his near execution. Judge Harmon departed with assurances that all legal records regarding the incident would be corrected. Officer Cunningham dismantled the euthanasia setup with evident relief. The Wilsons remained, their family tableau still fragile but healing in the presence of the dog, who had bridged past and present traumas. What happens to him now? Jason asked finally, watching as Emma once again settled comfortably against Shadow's side. He'll remain here until we can find an appropriate placement, Amber explained. Given his history and training, a working environment might be best. Perhaps with a search and rescue organization willing to accommodate his disabilities. Sarah and Jason exchanged a long look, years of marriage allowing for silent communication in that single glance. What would be involved in adopting him ourselves? Sarah asked hesitantly. Amber carefully controlled her expression, not wanting to influence what had to be a deeply personal decision. Are you sure that's something you want to consider, given the circumstances? I think it might be exactly what we need, Sarah replied, her hand finding Jason's. For all of us. Jason knelt slowly, maintaining a respectful distance from Shadow. I don't know if you remember me, he said softly to the dog. From before, from the canyon. But I remember you. I just didn't want to. Shadow's ear twitched, his attention shifting from Emma to Jason, that single intelligent eye studying the man before him. You didn't make the wrong choice, Jason continued, his voice thick with emotion. You did your job, just like you did yesterday with Emma. I'm the one who failed. And then I nearly... He couldn't finish the sentence. With careful movements, Jason extended his hand, palm down, stopping short of actually touching Shadow. The German shepherd observed the gesture for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, moved his scarred muzzle forward to make contact with Jason's fingertips. The simple act of forgiveness broke something loose in Jason Wilson. His shoulders sagged, tears he'd likely been holding back for years finally spilling freely. Sarah moved to his side, Emma still in her arms. Completing the circle, Amber stepped back, giving the family their moment of private reconciliation. Dr. Green appeared at her side, watching the scene with quiet satisfaction. Quite a difference from an hour ago, he observed softly. Amber nodded, her own eyes suspiciously damp. From death row to family dog in 60 minutes. That might be a shelter record. There's still paperwork, home visits, the formal adoption process, Green reminded her, though his tone lacked any real insistence on protocol. Something tells me the district attorney can navigate red tape pretty effectively when motivated, Amber replied with a small smile. Before them, Shadow remained at the center of the Wilson family circle. His scarred body and single eye no longer markers of a tragic past, but badges of honor in a new beginning. Emma patted his head with the innocent delight of a child too young to understand how close they'd all come to a very different outcome. "Dow home?" she asked, looking up at her parents with perfect toddler certainty. Sarah looked to Jason, who took a deep breath and nodded, his hand still resting gently on Shadow's scarred muzzle. "Yes, Emma," he answered, his voice steadying. "Dog home." The morning of Shadow's scheduled adoption, rain poured relentlessly over Riverdale, turning the animal shelter's parking lot into a field of puddles. Inside the building, Amber Rodriguez completed the final preparations with a sense of disbelief that still hadn't fully dissipated. 24 hours earlier, she had been preparing to end Shadow's life. Now, she was preparing adoption papers for the Wilson family. Life's strange reversals never ceased to amaze her. Even after years of shelter work, Shadow sat beside her desk, his scarred face somehow more dignified in the muted morning light. He'd been bathed and groomed, his coat brushed to a soft shine that couldn't hide his battle scars but framed them differently, marks of valor rather than misfortune. The standard shelter collar had been replaced with a new leather one, a gift from the shelter staff who had rallied around his cause. "You clean up pretty well for an old warrior," Amber told him, kneeling to adjust the collar. Shadow's single eye tracked her movements with that same steady intelligence that had first made her question the attack narrative. Dr. Green entered carrying Shadow's medical records, his expression unusually somber for what should have been a celebration. "Everything okay?" Amber asked, immediately sensing something amiss. Green sighed, setting the folder on her desk. "I just got a call from Sarah Wilson. There's been a complication." Amber's heart sank. Last-minute adoption cancellations weren't uncommon at the shelter, but after everything Shadow had endured, this particular rejection seemed especially cruel. "What happened?" she asked, unconsciously placing a protective hand on Shadow's head. "Jason Wilson suffered what appears to be a panic attack last night," Green explained quietly. Sarah found him in their home office at 3 a.m., surrounded by old photographs of his first daughter and newspaper clippings about the canyon incident. He was in a state of severe distress, questioning whether bringing Shadow into their home might be reopening wounds that haven't properly healed. Amber closed her eyes briefly, understanding washing over her. "The resemblance to Ranger is triggering his trauma." "Precisely," Green confirmed. "Sarah says he's been meeting with his therapist this morning. They're still committed to the adoption, but they've asked if they can postpone until this afternoon. Jason wants to be certain he's making this decision from a place of healing rather than guilt." Shadow remained perfectly still during this exchange, but Amber sensed a subtle shift in his demeanor, a slight lowering of his head, a barely perceptible sigh. She wondered, not for the first time, how much this remarkable animal truly understood. "Of course they can have more time," she replied. Shadow's not going anywhere. As the morning progressed, Amber found herself reluctant to leave Shadow's side. The German Shepherd accompanied her through her routine tasks, maintaining a dignified presence that drew admiring comments from volunteers and visitors alike. News of his dramatic rescue and near execution had spread through Riverdale, transforming him from feared stray to local celebrity overnight. Around noon, Mrs. Patterson arrived bearing a small basket of homemade dog biscuits and a worn leather photo album. "Thought our hero might appreciate a proper send-off treat," she explained, offering one of the biscuits to Shadow, who accepted it with gentle precision. "And I wanted to show you something before he goes to his new home." The elderly woman opened the album carefully, revealing methodically organized photographs with dates and notes in neat handwriting. "Been documenting the strays in our neighborhood for years," she explained. "My late husband used to say it gave me purpose after he got sick." She turned to a section labeled The Guardian and pointed to the earliest photograph of Shadow. It showed the German Shepherd standing at attention beside Riverdale Elementary School, watching children board buses. "First spotted him 2 years ago, September 15th. Mrs. Patterson narrated, "Always kept his distance, but always watching. Followed the school buses home, then circled back to check other routes." She turned more pages, revealing Shadow's gradual establishment of what appeared to be a patrol route through Riverdale past schools, playgrounds, the community pool, and residential areas with young families. "Notice anything about his patterns?" Mrs. Patterson asked, her weathered finger tracing the locations marked on a hand-drawn map. Amber studied the documentation with growing wonder. He was monitoring places where children might be in danger. Mrs. Patterson nodded, satisfied. Ranger may have lost his official job, but Shadow never stopped working. He appointed himself guardian of Riverdale's children. Emma Wilson wasn't his first save, just the most dramatic. She turned to additional photos showing Shadow appearing beside a child who had fallen off a bicycle, standing watch near a toddler who had wandered too close to a busy street until the frantic mother arrived, and positioning himself between a group of elementary schoolers and an aggressive unleashed dog. Nobody connected these incidents because he always disappeared before anyone could properly identify him, Mrs. Patterson explained. People just saw a scary-looking stray that happened to be nearby. They never realized he was actively watching over their children. Amber felt her throat tighten with emotion. "He's been seeking redemption for the girl he couldn't save in the canyon. Or perhaps just fulfilling his purpose," Mrs. Patterson suggested gently. "Not all heroes wear uniforms. Some have torn ears and one eye." The shelter door chimed, and Officer Cunningham entered, shaking rain from his jacket. His expression was unusually subdued as he approached Amber's desk. "Heard the Wilson adoption might be delayed," he said without preamble. "Thought you should know there's been some backlash on social media. Someone leaked that the DA tried to have a hero dog put down. His office is getting flooded with calls." Amber sighed. "That's the last thing Jason Wilson needs right now. He's struggling enough with his decision." "There's more," Cunningham continued reluctantly. "Robert Mitchell Shadow's original handler caught wind of the story. He's driving up from Phoenix, claiming he has legal ownership rights and wants the dog back." The news hit Amber like a physical blow. He abandoned Shadow 3 years ago, surrendered him to a shelter because he was too damaged to work. "I know," Cunningham agreed, his usual stern demeanor softening. "But legally, These ownership disputes can get complicated. I thought you should be prepared." After Cunningham departed, Amber knelt beside Shadow, meeting his steady gaze directly. "I won't let you go back to him," she promised quietly. "Not after he threw you away." Shadow responded by gently resting his scarred muzzle against her hand, a gesture of trust that only strengthened her resolve. By mid-afternoon, the shelter began filling with unexpected visitors. Channel 12. News had aired Brad Thompson's footage of Shadow's rescue, along with the full story of his search and rescue background. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Supporters arrived with dog treats, handmade cards from local school children, and even a custom bed donated by a local pet store. Dr. Green watched the gathering crowd with mixed emotions. "This attention would normally be wonderful for raising awareness about shelter animals, but I'm concerned about the impact on the Wilsons and on Shadow himself." Amber shared his concern. The growing circus-like atmosphere seemed at odds with the dignified German shepherd, who maintained his calm demeanor amidst the chaos, accepting the attention with patient tolerance rather than enthusiasm. At 3:45 p.m., Amber's phone rang. Sarah Wilson's name flashed on the screen. "Mrs. Wilson," Amber answered, stepping into a quieter office. "How is everything going?" "We're on our way," Sarah replied, her voice tight with emotion. "Jason's session was difficult but clarifying. He's ready. We're all ready. There have been some developments here you should know about," Amber explained, detailing the media attention and the potential complication with Robert Mitchell. A long silence followed. "Will this man Mitchell be there when we arrive?" "Not yet, as far as I know, but he's apparently on his way from Phoenix." "Then we should hurry," Sarah decided. "Jason needs to do this now, while his resolve is strong. The longer we wait, the more time his doubts have to resurface." After ending the call, Amber returned to the lobby to find Shadow sitting motionless amid the growing crowd, his attention fixed on the shelter's front door as if expecting someone. The German shepherd's intuition continued to surprise her. "They're coming," she told him softly. "Let's get ready." As Amber led Shadow to the adoption room, she felt a curious mixture of joy and trepidation. The happy ending she'd fought for was within reach, yet the shadow of Robert Mitchell's claim loomed over the proceedings. Legal battles over animal ownership could drag on for months, leaving Shadow in limbo or worse, returned to the man who had abandoned him. Shadow seemed to sense her unease, pressing closer to her leg than usual as they walked the corridor. His training remained impeccable, but there was something more personal in the contact, something that transcended handler and dog. In the quiet of the adoption room, away from the clamor of well-wishers, Amber knelt to Shadow's level one last time. "Whatever happens next," she promised him, "I'll make sure you're safe. You've saved enough lives. Now it's our turn to save yours." Shadow's response was to gently place his paw on her arm, the gesture so human-like in its comfort that Amber felt tears threaten. This extraordinary dog had survived abandonment, life on the streets, and a near execution. He had saved a child, despite his own injuries and traumas. Yet here he was, offering consolation to her. The sound of the shelter's front door opening reached them even in the back room. Voices in the lobby rose in volume, questions, exclamations, the distinctive sound of media equipment being readied. Then, cutting through the noise, a man's voice rose in commanding authority. "I'm here about the German Shepherd. My name is Robert Mitchell. That dog belongs to me." Shadow's entire body tensed at the sound of the voice, his single eye widening in recognition. The change was immediate and heartbreaking. The proud, dignified animal, suddenly alert in a way that spoke not of anticipation, but of deep-seated anxiety. For the first time since his arrival at the shelter, Shadow began to tremble. The shelter's adoption room, normally a place of joyful beginnings, had transformed into the eye of an emotional storm. Through the closed door, Amber could hear the commotion building in the lobby, Robert Mitchell's authoritative voice competing with the protests of Shadow's supporters. The German Shepherd pressed against her leg, his trembling now unmistakable. "It's okay," she whispered, though the reassurance felt hollow even to her ears. Shadow's reaction to his former handler's voice told her everything she needed to know about their relationship. A sharp knock broke the tension. "Doctor." Green entered, his face grave. "Mitchell's here with documentation, original adoption papers, registration certificates, even Ranger's service dog ID. He's demanding immediate custody." "And the Wilsons?" Amber asked, her hand protectively on Shadow's head. "Just pulled into the parking lot. This is going to be a mess." Green ran a hand through his silver hair. "Mitchell's already talking about legal action if we don't release the dog to him immediately." Amber straightened, military training asserting itself in her posture. "Shadow stays with me until we sort this out. I want the Wilsons brought in through the back entrance. And someone needs to call Animal Services Legal Department." Green nodded, appreciating her decisive approach. As he left to make arrangements, Amber knelt beside Shadow, cupping his scarred face gently between her hands. "I need you to trust me," she told him firmly. "Whatever happens out there, whatever you hear, stay with me. Understand?" Shadow's trembling gradually subsided under her steady gaze. The German Shepherd's single eye locked with hers, a silent communication passing between them. He shifted his weight, settling into an alert but calmer posture. Minutes later, Sarah and Jason Wilson were ushered into the room through the staff entrance, Emma balanced on her father's hip. The toddler immediately spotted Shadow, her delighted "Dal" piercing the tension. Jason looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, betraying his sleepless night. But his jaw was set with determination. "We heard someone's claiming ownership. Robert Mitchell, Shadow's Ranger's original handler," Amber confirmed. "He abandoned him after the canyon accident, but technically, he may have legal claim if he never formally surrendered ownership." Sarah stepped forward, her expression fierce. "That man threw Shadow away when he was injured. He doesn't get to waltz back in now that everyone knows he's a hero." Before they could discuss further, the adoption room door swung open. Robert Mitchell stood in the doorway, an imposing figure in crisp outdoor gear that suggested he still worked in search and rescue. Behind him, Officer Cunningham and Dr. Green hovered uncertainly. "Ranger," Mitchell said sharply, ignoring the humans in the room. The command in his voice was unmistakable, a handler addressing his working dog. Shadow's reaction was immediate and heart-wrenching. Though he didn't move from Amber's side, his body lowered slightly, ears flattening. Not aggression. Amber realized with growing anger, but submission born of fear. Mitchell's gaze swept the room, finally settling on Jason Wilson, recognition flashed across both men's faces simultaneously. "You," Mitchell said, his confident demeanor faltering momentarily. "The father from the canyon." Jason handed Emma to Sarah, stepping forward with the careful control of a man containing powerful emotions. "And you're the handler who abandoned your dog after he saved my life." The accusation hung in the air between them. Mitchell recovered quickly, his expression hardening. "I made a difficult professional decision. Ranger was severely traumatized after the incident. He couldn't perform his duties anymore." "Because he lost an eye?" Amber challenged, rising to stand protectively beside Shadow. "Or because he reminded you of a rescue that wasn't perfectly successful?" Mitchell's attention shifted to her, his gaze dismissive. "You don't understand the standards required for search and rescue work. A dog that's hesitant, that's damaged physically or psychologically, endangers lives." "He saved my daughter's life 3 days ago," Sarah interjected, moving to stand beside her husband, Emma still in her arms. "He hasn't forgotten his training or his purpose." "Which is exactly why I'm here to reclaim him," Mitchell replied smoothly. "Clearly, he's recovered enough to return to proper handling." "Under my guidance? He could potentially work again in a limited capacity, of course." The calculated assessment, delivered without a shred of genuine attachment to the dog he'd abandoned, ignited something in Amber she rarely allowed herself to express professionally. "You don't want him," she stated flatly. "You want the story, the hero dog rescued from death row, the media attention." Mitchell's expression confirmed her accusation before he could formulate a denial. His gaze flicked toward the lobby where news cameras waited. "Dr. Green cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all take a step back and consider what's best for Shadow. The legal questions about ownership can be—" "There's no legal question," Mitchell interrupted. "I have all the original documentation. I never legally surrendered ownership. I placed him with a rescue organization temporarily, with the understanding that he wouldn't be adopted without my consent. Conveniently, all those people at the rescue are gone," Amber noted acidly. "No one to contradict your version of events." Mitchell's expression hardened. "I don't have to justify myself to shelter staff. I've already spoken with your county's animal services director. Either you release my dog to me now, or I'll return with law enforcement and a court order." Throughout this exchange, Shadow remained pressed against Amber's leg, his body language communicating clear distress at Mitchell's presence. The German Shepherd's reaction wasn't lost on Jason Wilson, whose expression shifted from anger to thoughtful calculation, the prosecutor assessing evidence. "Mr. Mitchell," Jason began, his courtroom voice asserting itself. "As Riverdale's district attorney, I should inform you that making false claims about animal ownership constitutes fraud. Additionally, abandoning a service animal with the intent to mislead about your surrender of rights could potentially violate several state statutes." Mitchell's confident facade wavered. "I have documentation which I'd be very interested in examining," Jason continued smoothly, "particularly since I've just come from my office where I had my staff pull every record related to the canyon incident, including the official report from Arizona State Search and Rescue, which states, and I quote, "Handler Robert Mitchell formally surrendered all rights to SAR Dog Ranger. Badge number K435 following medical discharge." The color drained from Mitchell's face. "That's not—" My office has already requested certified copies of those documents, Jason continued relentlessly. Should take about an hour for them to arrive by email. In the meantime, perhaps we should discuss the potential consequences of filing false claims of ownership. Mitchell's confident posture crumbled visibly. Look, I just thought with all the publicity that you could cash in on abandoning an injured hero, Sarah finished, her normally gentle demeanor hardened by maternal protectiveness. After leaving him to fend for himself on the streets for years, Emma, sensing the tension, began to fuss in her mother's arms. At the sound of the child's distress, Shadow's attention immediately shifted. Despite his own evident fear of Mitchell, the German shepherd moved toward Emma, positioning himself protectively near the toddler. The simple action silenced the room more effectively than any argument. Shadow, despite his own trauma, still prioritized a child's well-being over his personal comfort or safety. Mitchell observed the interaction, something unreadable crossing his features. For a brief moment, shame seemed to flicker behind his confident facade. He always did prefer children, he said quietly, the first genuine emotion coloring his voice. Even in training, he'd work twice as hard if the scenario involved a child in danger. Jason Wilson stepped forward, placing himself between Mitchell and Shadow in a gesture that seemed as much protective as confrontational. Mr. Mitchell, I think we both know you surrendered all legal rights to this dog years ago. Whatever your motivations for coming here today, I suggest you reconsider. He paused, something shifting in his expression. We've both failed him in different ways. You abandoned him when he was injured. I nearly had him killed because of my own unresolved grief. Perhaps it's time we both consider what Shadow needs, rather than what we want. The unexpected empathy in Jason's approach seemed to penetrate Mitchell's defenses. He looked at Shadow, truly looked at him, perhaps for the first time since entering the room. The German shepherd stared back, neither cowering nor challenging, his single eye reflecting a dignity his former handler had failed to recognize. He seems attached to the child, Mitchell observed, his voice losing its demanding edge. He saved her life, Sarah replied simply. Just like he tried to save Lily's. Just like he saved Jason's. Mitchell flinched at the mention of the canyon rescue, clearly uncomfortable with the reminder of that traumatic day. He stepped back, his posture subtly changing from confrontation to retreat. I'll need to consult with my attorney about the documentation you mentioned, he said to Jason. A face-saving formality rather than a genuine threat. Of course, Jason replied evenly. My office will be happy to provide copies of everything we have, including the surrender forms with your signature. As Mitchell turned to leave, his eyes met Shadow's one final time. Something unspoken passed between handler and dog, not reconciliation. Exactly. But perhaps a kind of closure. He was the best search dog I ever trained, Mitchell admitted quietly. Before the accident. He still is, Amber replied, her hand resting protectively on Shadow's scarred head. The accident didn't change that. It only changed how you saw him. After Mitchell departed, escorted by Officer Cunningham, the tension in the room dissolved into relieved sighs and nervous laughter. Shadow, sensing the shift in atmosphere, relaxed visibly, moving to check on Emma, who immediately reached for his ears with delighted giggles. Will he be back? Sarah asked, watching the door with lingering concern. Jason shook his head. I doubt it. The documentation I mentioned does exist. I confirmed it this morning during my episode, when I was obsessively researching everything about the canyon incident. I found the official records. Mitchell formally surrendered ownership after Ranger was deemed medically unfit for service. Dr. Green, who had remained a quiet presence throughout the confrontation, stepped forward. Then I believe we can proceed with the adoption, if you're still certain. Jason knelt beside Shadow, maintaining a respectful distance as he addressed the dog directly. I spent 3 years blaming you for a tragedy that wasn't your fault. Then I nearly had you killed for saving my daughter. I'm not sure I deserve your forgiveness, but I'd like the chance to earn it. Shadow studied Jason with that uncanny intelligence, then slowly, deliberately moved forward to bridge the distance between them. He gently pressed his scarred muzzle against Jason's hand, the same gesture of forgiveness he'd offered in the lobby the day before. Amber observed the moment with a bittersweet mixture of joy and loss. This was what she worked for, finding permanent homes for animals in need. Yet Shadow's case had affected her more deeply than she cared to admit. "Shall we complete the paperwork?" she suggested, her professional demeanor hiding the emotion threatening to crack her voice. As Dr. O'Green prepared the adoption forms, Amber knelt one last time beside Shadow. "You're going home, old warrior," she whispered. "A real home, with people who understand exactly how special you are." Shadow's response was to lean briefly against her, a silent acknowledgment of their connection, before turning his attention back to the family that would become his own. In his single amber eye, Amber saw not just intelligence but peace, the look of a dog who had finally found his place in the world. The truth, revealed through crisis and confrontation, had finally set Shadow free. 3 months after the day Shadow nearly lost his life at Riverdale Animal Shelter, summer's intense heat had given way to the gentler warmth of early autumn. The Wilson family's backyard had undergone a transformation almost as remarkable as the one within their household. The once open pool now featured a secure fence with child-proof gates, and a portion of the expansive lawn had been converted into a specialized training area with obstacles and challenges designed for a working dog's continued enrichment. Shadow still called by that name rather than Ranger. A deliberate choice to honor his new beginning lounged on the shaded patio. His scarred body stretched out comfortably as he maintained watchful supervision of Emma's play area. The toddler, now steady on her feet at 18 months, carefully arranged plastic blocks under the additional supervision of her mother. "He hasn't taken his eyes off her for a second," Sarah observed to her husband, who was arranging hamburgers on the grill for their weekend lunch. "Not even when the delivery truck came earlier." Jason nodded, his expression softening as he observed the German Shepherd's attentive vigilance. "Dr. Hernandez says that's normal for him. He's still fulfilling his purpose. She doesn't think he'll ever fully retire from seeing himself as Emma's protector." The mention of Dr. Hernandez, the canine behavioral specialist who had been working with Shadow and the Wilson family twice weekly since the adoption, brought a smile to Sarah's face. "She said his progress is remarkable, especially considering everything he's been through." The everything encompassed far more than Shadow's recent brush with euthanasia. The veterinary specialist Jason had consulted after the adoption confirmed what Shadow's scars had long suggested. The German Shepherd had survived not only the canyon collapse that damaged his eye, but likely multiple instances of harm during his years on the street. X-rays revealed old fractures consistent with being struck by vehicles. Healed lacerations suggested confrontations with other animals, and dental work identified malnutrition during his hardest months. Yet despite this litany of suffering, Shadow had emerged with his essential nature intact, watchful, protective, and possessed of a dignified intelligence that continued to astonish everyone who encountered him. "Special delivery," called a familiar voice from the side gate. Amber Rodriguez appeared, carrying a gift bag adorned with paw prints. Behind her followed Dr. Green, Mrs. Patterson, and several other familiar faces from the shelter and neighborhood who had become regular visitors to the Wilson home. Shadow's ears perked up at the sound of Amber's voice. Though his attention remained divided, one part focused on Emma, the other acknowledging the arrival of friends. Only when Sarah moved to sit directly beside Emma did Shadow rise to greet the visitors. Approaching Amber first with a gentle nudge of his scarred muzzle against her hand. "Hello, handsome," Amber greeted him, kneeling to better receive his welcome. "Getting more distinguished every time I see you." The observation wasn't merely flattery. Shadow's appearance had undergone subtle but significant changes in the months since his adoption. Proper nutrition had restored luster to his coat. Regular grooming had tamed the wild appearance of his fur. The torn ear would never fully heal, nor would his missing eye regenerate. But these marks of his difficult journey now seemed less like disfigurements and more like badges of honor. "The reconstructive surgery site is healing beautifully," Green noted, professional assessment mixing with genuine pleasure as he observed his former patient. The procedure to repair Shadow's facial scarring, a gift from Jason Wilson to the dog who had saved both his daughters in different ways, had been performed 6 weeks earlier by a specialist in veterinary reconstructive surgery. "He's still favoring his right side, slightly," Jason observed as Shadow made his rounds of the guests, accepting gentle pets and quiet greetings with dignified patience. "The physical therapist says that might always be the case. Small price to pay for what he went through," Mrs. Patterson commented, settling herself in a patio chair with the careful movements of her age. At Shadow's approach, she produced a small treat from her pocket, a ritual the German shepherd clearly anticipated, judging by his expectant posture. "Still spoiling him rotten," Sarah teased the elderly woman gently. "Earned every bit of it, Mrs. Patterson replied unapologetically, watching with satisfaction as Shadow delicately accepted her offering. The gathering settled into the comfortable rhythm of friends who had been drawn together by extraordinary circumstances, but whose connections had deepened into genuine affection. As Jason served lunch and conversation flowed around the patio table, Shadow resumed his post near Emma, occasionally accepting a morsel slipped to him by various admirers despite Sarah's half-hearted protests about table manners. "Have you seen the Foundation website?" Amber asked as the meal progressed. "It's gotten over 50,000 visits since the launch last month." Jason nodded, evident pride tempering his usual reserved demeanor. "The response has been overwhelming. We've already identified 3 service dogs in need of medical interventions their handlers couldn't afford." The Shadow Foundation, established by the Wilsons in the weeks following the adoption, provided financial support for the medical needs of working and service dogs whose injuries or health issues might otherwise lead to their retirement or surrender. What had begun as a personal gesture of atonement had quickly grown into something much larger. Fueled by the media attention surrounding Shadow's story and Jason's connections in the legal and business communities. "And the school program starts next week," Sarah added, her enthusiasm evident. With her background in pediatric medicine, she had developed an educational initiative teaching children about responsible pet ownership and animal safety, with Shadow serving as the program's living ambassador during carefully supervised visits. "Never seen a dog better suited for working with kids," Dr. Todd Green observed. "He has just the right combination of patience and protectiveness." As if to illustrate this point, Emma chose that moment to toddle over to Shadow, plopping down beside him with the complete confidence of a child who has never known anything but gentle treatment from an animal. Shadow shifted his position slightly to accommodate her, creating a protective semicircle with his body while simultaneously staying alert to the adult's conversation. "It's hard to believe this is the same dog that was minutes away from euthanasia," Amber reflected, the memory still capable of eliciting a shudder despite the happy outcome. Jason's expression grew momentarily somber. "I think about that every day," he admitted quietly. "How close we came to losing him because of my inability to face my own past." Sarah reached for her husband's hand, the gesture automatic and supportive. "But you did face it. That's what matters." The therapy Jason had committed to following Shadow's adoption had gradually allowed him to process the grief and guilt surrounding his first daughter's death, emotions he had suppressed for years beneath his controlled exterior. The journey wasn't complete, nor would it ever be. But the presence of Shadow in their home provided a daily opportunity for healing rather than a painful reminder of loss. As afternoon progressed toward evening, the gathering slowly dispersed with promises of future visits. Amber was the last to leave, lingering to help clean up and spend a few extra moments with the dog, who had affected her more deeply than any other in her years of shelter work. "You know you're always welcome here," Sarah told her warmly. "He lights up when you visit." Amber smiled, watching as Shadow supervised Emma's bath time through the open bathroom door, his vigilant presence a constant in the Wilson household. "He's exactly where he belongs," she replied, "doing exactly what he was born to do." Later, as twilight settled over Riverdale, the Wilson family completed their evening routine. Emma, freshly bathed and pajama-clad, insisted on her nightly ritual, a story read by her father, while Shadow maintained his protective presence beside her bed. Jason settled into the reading chair, Emma on his lap. The children's book opened to her favorite tale about a brave dog who helped others. Shadow positioned himself precisely at their feet, his single amber eye reflecting the soft lamplight as he listened with what seemed like genuine interest to the familiar story. "Tao brave," Emma commented sleepily as the story concluded, her small hand reaching down to pat Shadow's head in a gesture that had become second nature. "Yes, he is," Jason agreed, his voice thick with emotion that no longer embarrassed him. "The bravest dog in the whole world." As Emma drifted toward sleep, Jason carefully transferred her to her bed, tucking the covers around her with practiced tenderness. Shadow remained in position, maintaining his quiet vigil. "You can rest too, you know," Jason told the German shepherd softly. "She's safe." Shadow acknowledged the reassurance with a slight tilt of his head, but made no move to leave his post. Some habits, especially those born of both training and hard-won experience, ran too deep to easily set aside. Jason knelt beside the scarred dog who had saved both his daughters and, in many ways, himself. "Thank you," he whispered. the simple words encompassing a universe of gratitude that transcended explanation. Shadow's response was to gently rest his muzzle against Jason's arm, the gesture of connection that had become their private communication, a bridge across species and past traumas to a shared understanding. In the quiet of Emma's room, with twilight deepening outside and the gentle sounds of a child's peaceful breathing filling the air, a once abandoned hero had found his home, and a once broken family had found its healing. The truth, revealed in its proper time, had indeed set them all free. Shadow's journey reminds us that life's most profound healing often comes from unexpected sources. Like many of us in our golden years, this one-eyed German shepherd carried the visible and invisible scars of a lifetime abandoned when no longer perfect, left to fend for himself after years of loyal service, and nearly discarded when misunderstood. Yet within that battle-worn exterior lived an unwavering spirit that never forgot its purpose. When a child needed saving, Shadow didn't hesitate despite his own pain. His story speaks to everyone who's ever felt cast aside, undervalued, or defined by their limitations rather than their capabilities. It tells us it's never too late for second chances, for reconciliation, for purpose. The Wilson family discovered what we all seek, that our broken pieces, when acknowledged honestly, can become the foundation for our greatest connections. When Jason finally faced his grief instead of burying it, healing began not just for him, but for everyone around him. Shadow's story reminds us that sometimes the most wounded among us have the most to give, and that true heroism isn't about perfection, it's about showing up with whatever strength remains when someone needs us most.